Larken Rose here, and you can tell how much effort I'm putting into this particular video setup. I wanted to do a video about something that even a bunch of voluntarists and anarchists, I think, it's easy to miss this distinction, but I think it's important to make. It's perfectly possible to be a good, decent person and also be both ignorant and gullible. And so being clueless and easily scared doesn't make somebody a bad person. However, it does make them very easy targets for bad people. And so where is the line at which somebody's stupidity and gullibility and lack of education and lack of critical thinking skills, where is the line at which that becomes something deserving of condemning? And in short, the line is whenever they step over from allowing themselves to fall for stuff to trying to impose stuff on other people by way of authoritarian control. Now, can anybody think of an example of this in the last few years? So even the people who, for example, and now I can talk about this because all of the things that the experts were claiming and some of us were saying that's a bald-faced lie. We were saying it the whole time, and a bunch of us were getting like bans and videos taken down. I got a video taken down on YouTube. I got banned several times temporarily on Facebook for saying things that the experts have now admitted that we were right about all along, and they lied about the whole freaking time. So there's lots and lots of those examples. But to me, I can feel sympathy, or it was easier before. In the middle of all this ridiculous circus, I could feel sympathy for the people who were out there who didn't know any better. They sucked at science. They didn't know what was going on. So they just deferred to somebody else. And they believed the fear-mongering. And they believed the government experts. And they thought that they actually gave a crap about public health and things like that. And so they're out there wearing masks. Well, now we know, and it's proved. It was already proved. And some of us were saying it the whole time. The masks didn't do any good. They never did any good. They never did any good. They provably never did any good. The data already showed at the beginning of this, they never do any good. And at the beginning, even the same experts that later were pushing the mask stupidity on everybody admitted that, yeah, if you don't have symptoms, don't do it because it won't do any good, and it won't do any good for this, and we're not really going to stop the spread. We might just slow it a little bit, and they don't even do that. But I can still feel a little bit of sympathy for the people back then who just fell for it, and they thought, well, I guess better safe than sorry, and their talking is really scary, and we're all going to die horribly if we don't wear masks and stay 6 feet apart and all sorts of other ridiculous things. So the people who merely believed that, it's easy to have contempt for, contempt and condemnation are two different things, because you can sort of have contempt for somebody even if they're not being malicious and evil, but they're just remarkably gullible and stupid. And that's sort of sad. And I try not to have contempt for people even for being stupid, because it must suck to be them. And they're not trying to hurt other people. They're just falling for stupid stuff, which is like most of the world most of the time. But when they switch from they're scared and they're minding their own business and they're just like, I better wear a mask and I'll stay 6 feet apart and I'm going to stay at home unless it's super necessary, they're only victimizing themselves, which is sad enough, but that's like they have the right to victimize themselves. Like they own themselves. They can go completely overboard on whatever precautions they think might do some good. It's when they're, and if you know what to look for, it's pretty easy to watch the switch. It's when they step over the line into wanting to lord over other people their own fear and telling other people, if you don't wear a mask, I guess you just want grandma to die. And if you don't get this jab, then you're a horrible person and you deserve. And you all saw people who did that. It was easy to see them on TV. They were all over the place, but you probably met plenty in real life too. those people don't get the benefit of the doubt for me. They don't deserve it because they can't just plead ignorance and gullibility because they turned around and were cheerleaders for authoritarian evil. And there's a big difference there. And anybody who's even slightly observant and thinking about things can often notice the difference. Like if you go somewhere without a mask and somebody with a mask comes up and gets in your face and goes, you know, you're irresponsible for not wearing a mask and you really ought to be wearing a mask. That's an evil piece of shit. And I say that completely unrelated to the actual fear-mongering. Because they're not even abiding by their fear-mongering. Like, if they actually believe that people without masks are this horrible, like, walking death, would they come up and get in your face? Hey, you're risking others by, like, being right in front of them, which I wasn't until you came up to whine at me? Like, if you believed your own bullshit, you wouldn't have done what you just did. You would keep your distance because you're scared that, like, this is a zombie apocalypse because you're that gullible and clueless. But that sort of behavior shows that their top priority isn't a result of them being gullible or stupid. It's they love the feeling of power and self-righteousness, and the falling for this particular fear-mongering BS is just what happened to make it come out. And by the way, this isn't nearly restricted to just the pandemic bullshit that happened. It's a ton of different issues. Like gun control is a huge one. If somebody's like, oh, it's horrible that like kids are getting shot in schools and we have to do something. Okay, so far I can sympathize because yeah, that's really freaking horrible. And to feel really upset and to desperately want that to stop, I can sympathize with that. That's something a good person can and would feel. It's when they step over the line into, we're going to disarm everybody and ban these, and if you don't want to give it up, then you're the evil. Like when they jump over that line into cheering for authoritarian violence, which is what gun control is, they can't pretend to be decent people anymore because you're not. If you were just scared and gullible, that's one thing. If you were upset and desperate to do something, okay. But when the do something is violent aggression against millions of people you don't know, and you cheer for that, and you hate anybody who says, wait a minute, that's not the solution. I didn't threaten and harm anybody. And you're talking about having the government come violently disarm me. That's not okay. And they're all bitter and angry and self-righteous. Okay, that's not a good person. That's not what a duped, ignorant person looks like. That's what a bad person looks like. An immoral, power-happy, self-centered piece of shit. That's what that looks like. David Hogg is a narcissistic, self-centered piece of shit pretending that it's virtue and that it's caring about others. No, it isn't. It's absolutely about himself and wanting the feeling of power, nagging other people and telling other people, here's what government should do to you evil gun owners. That doesn't come from any good place. It doesn't even just come from gullibility or ignorance. It comes from the desire to control others. And here's the thing. Most people, if you give them the opportunity to lord power over other people, that's going to be really tempting. Now, how many of those people can resist that temptation and go, no, that's not okay? You know, you can debate that. But a lot of the people who point out injustices or problems or whatever and are genuinely concerned, okay, cool. Like, I'm all in favor of people being concerned about things that shouldn't be happening. Okay, good. That's a good sign. But when they are so eager to jump to, this is why we need government violence to control it, that shows their real motivation and it shows their real belief. And that's why the distinguishing characteristic is the principle of self-ownership. Because if somebody's scared of something and they do certain things to their own lives and they restrict themselves, even if it's in a completely misguided, ignorant way, okay, they have the right to do that. They own themselves. They can restrict themselves all they want. They can hide in a corner for 6 months thinking that's going to protect them when it'll do absolutely nothing good for them and will absolutely be detrimental to their quality of life. But they have the right to do that. They have the right to make stupid choices with their own lives. So does everybody else. It's when they want to forcibly impose their bad ideas on other people that they show their true colors. And again, this is not at all limited to the pandemic thing. It's all over the place. And unfortunately, in fact, I was about to say there's a lot of statists. It's pretty much all of them. Everybody who believes in government, when they're on the losing end of some authoritarian control, that's when they pretend to give a shit about principles. This is not okay. I have the right to right to bodily autonomy and choose what I want to do with my own body, says the pro-choice crowd. Until it comes to getting stabbed by Big Pharma, and then a huge percentage of them are, you have to do this or you shouldn't be allowed to set foot in public or go anywhere. It's like, okay, so you don't at all believe in bodily autonomy. You just want that for yourself and you don't give a shit if anybody else has it. That's not a principle. That's just you being a selfish, hypocritical butthead. And sadly, that is statists. That's old statists. And to be fair, I'll bash the other side. The conservative gun owners will wax eloquent about the principles of individual rights and like, I have my gun and I didn't hurt anybody and I didn't threaten anybody. You, the political left, you don't get to forcibly disarm me on the excuse that, well, there's lots of these people who own guns and if we violently disarm all of them, maybe that'll prevent some of them from later doing something nasty. So the left is there advocating violent aggression against a huge category of people because we think some of them might later do something nasty, like a shooting or something, if we don't violently subjugate this huge number of people. And the conservatives, and in this case rightly so, say that's bogus, that's immoral, using violence against tons of people based on what you think some of them might later do. And in the next frickin' breath, the majority of those conservatives will say, we need border controls because human trafficking and drug smuggling. Oh, is everybody coming across the border doing that? Well, no. A lot of them are just like coming to get work and be productive and stuff. Oh, okay. So you advocate the widespread violent aggression against a giant category of people based on what you think some of them might later do? Huh. Wasn't I just hearing somebody condemning that way of thinking? Oh, it was you when it came to guns. But you just threw that principle out the window when it came to immigration because it didn't suit your purposes to actually abide by that principle then. That's called not having principles. And it's ridiculous how often people of all political persuasions do exactly that. When they're on the receiving end of authoritarian injustice, they talk about principles like they give a shit. And, I mean, one of the biggest examples, not even going to get into the thing of abortion, but the fact that the pro-abortion crowd uses the label pro-choice is just amazing to me. Because the political left is anti-choice in almost every aspect of life except abortion. So to try to use the pro-choice label as if, yes, we are pro-choice, like that's the whole description. They're not saying they're pro-abortion. We're pro-choice. Except when it comes to people earning money or deciding who to trade with or who to hire or who to fire or where to go or who to associate with, who to disassociate with, what words they can use to describe other people. No, you don't get to choose any of those things. You don't get to earn some money and not give a cut to the ruling class. But we're pro-choice because we want you to be able to have this choice in this particular issue. You're not pro-choice. You're anti-choice in almost everything and pro-choice in that one area. And that's all statists. Like, to one degree or another, there's a bunch of areas in which they want authoritarian violent aggression used against other people. And often it's a basis of fear. Like, oh my God, the immigrants. There's 8 million billion Mexicans coming up. Tomorrow they're going to flood the whole country and we're all going to die. So another one of them just happened or is happening or is being hyped. How many other ones of those have happened before that just were a giant nothing sandwich? Like, when Trump was in, here comes this giant convoy of millions coming up. We need to build that wall. What happened? People literally just forgot and nothing happened. And so the fear-mongering, people being concerned, in fact, even people being concerned, like if they live near the border. I mean, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. It's not all that far from the border. There's lots of Mexicans here. I assume there's lots of illegal Mexicans here, and I don't give a crap. Like, I don't care if somebody has written permission of political parasites to be here or not. They're people. They own themselves just as much, whether or not they have a little piece of paper that says a bunch of political parasites thousands of miles away have given them permission to be on this half a continent. So that whole thing's ridiculous. But if somebody's right at the border and they're like, yeah, sometimes scary people come over, like we're drug cartel people or something, and I'm living right there and that's scary, I can sympathize with them being scared. Now, a lot of times I think it's hugely overblown and there's political opportunists trying to scare them way more than is justified. But some nasty things do happen related to the border, and nasty things can be done by illegal aliens, just like nasty things can be done by legal aliens or legal people who aren't aliens and who have lived there, you know, whose families have been here for generations and are still like scumbag jerks. But having the fear in general and then resorting to falling for authoritarian violence against innocent people, that's where that's the line that matters. So if somebody says, I'm scared of these illegals coming over and some of them are robbing liquor stores and blah, 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 or they might say that about, you know, I'm scared of the black people in the inner cities doing this and that and the other stuff. And if you're pointing to individual things that actually are bad, okay, you being scared of that is fine. And you being armed against the people who might do that is fine. And you preparing to defend yourself against the people who might do those bad things, the actual people, that's fine. Because that's justified and that's moral. And even if I think your fear is overblown or underblown, it doesn't really matter if you're only going to defend yourself against actual aggressors. Like, you can get all prepared to defend yourself against something that's never going to happen. It's like, well, oh well, may have been a waste of your time, but you didn't do anything immoral being prepared to a threat that was either non-existent or way smaller than you thought it was. That's perfectly fine. But when you fall for the trick that makes you cheer for violent authoritarian aggression in the name of defending against that, and it's what people do with border controls, it's what people do with gun control, it's what people did with the stupid pandemic restrictions, is we get the people scared and then we get them begging us to inflict authoritarian violence and control lots and lots of people who haven't done anything wrong. When people step over that line, that is when they stop having my pity and they start getting my condemnation. Because that is when they're demonstrating they're not just ignorant, they're not just gullible, they don't just have bad critical thinking skills, they have no moral principles because they will cheer for evil violence against other people if they think it will serve their own interests. And that's everybody who believes in government. So one last distinction I want to make here is the people who step over that line from I'm sort of scared about something that maybe it's hyped, maybe it's made up, maybe it's a real concern, and so I want to be prepared. The people who step over the line into now I'm cheering for violence against innocent people because I'm scared of that thing. And that's what the left did when it comes to the pandemic. It's what the right does all the time when it comes to border controls and cracking down on illegal drugs, using violence against tons of people who didn't do anything. That's what the left does with gun control. Like, both sides do it all over the place. It's what politics is for. But to me, there's one more very important distinction to cover, which is of all those gullible, scared people who cheer for violence, how many of them would do that if they didn't believe in government? How many of them would, on their own, resort to immoral violence against categories of people? And there probably are some, but I guarantee it's a way, way smaller number than the people who will so eagerly run to the monster called government and ask it to use violence on their behalf. Like, do you think someone who's just scared, oh, there's a virus going around and I'm going to hide in my house and wear a mask, and now I'm going to go door to door with a shotgun and make sure nobody else has their business open? You think any of them would have done that? No, because one, they would have been cowards, and two, they wouldn't have felt morally justified in doing such a thing. But when there's government and they believe in political authority, it just makes it so much easier to bring out their unprincipled, immoral control freak side, because they don't have to do it themselves, they don't incur any risk, and they don't accept any responsibility for cheering for the state to use violence against all those people. And there are some people who would use violence on their own, but the number of people who only cheer for the violence because it's done by government and it's legalized and authorities doing it, I just voted for them to do it, it is a massive difference. And the thing is, I don't forgive people for cheering for it by way of government, because it's still wrong. But it's so much more tempting for people when that monster is there to cheer for violence that they would never commit on their own. And an actually moral, principled person can be scared of something and say, but of course I'm not going to advocate violence against people that didn't do anything. Like if there's people having a party in their backyard and I think they're probably spreading a disease, I'll just stay in my house and wear a mask and sanitize the hell out of everything, completely destroy my immune system in the process, thinking I'm being safe. And they can do what they want on their property. I can tell them, you don't come on my property because I'm scared of the zombie apocalypse that's completely made up. But they get to do that. And I might tell them I think it's dangerous and a bad idea, but I'm not going to advocate anybody use violence to make them make the choices I think they should make. And so the trouble is, the belief in authority is a massive amplifier of the human flaw of so quickly jumping to wanting to be able to control other people and tell other people what choices to make and violently dominate them. Because most people don't want to do that on their own because they feel bad about it and they're scared of the risks they would incur. And government says, you don't have to feel bad about it if you vote, if you ask government to use your violence for you. And so the gullible people, the scared people, the ignorant people, the people whose critical thinking skills just suck, which is most of this country, it's most of the world, I try to have sympathy for them. If they're actually willing to live and let live and they just fell for some fear-mongering BS, whatever it is, about guns, about a virus, about immigration, about drugs, about whatever you want to bring up. If they're just scared, I have sympathy for them. It's sad. In fact, I have pity. Because imagine what it would be like to be the person who actually believes all the crap they see on TV from CNN and the rest of them. Every night, it's like something perfectly normal you've done your whole life, maybe killing you. Details at 11. Like, that's most of what the media does. Imagine being somebody who still believes that. That's got to be a sucky life. Every 5 seconds, you're terrified of some new thing you can't possibly do anything about. And all you can do is hide in a corner and ask government to save the day. So I feel sympathy. Anybody still wearing a mask, I feel sorry for them. That they're so gullible that they're victimizing themselves. But if they don't go over the line into victimizing other people, then I don't hate them. I don't view them as an enemy. I just view it as sort of sad that they're harming themselves for no good reason. So, anyway, I was about to say that's all I need to say about it. But I have to throw this in because it's heinous. It's one thing to look at a threat and go, well, I don't really know. I mean, I'm no expert, so I guess I'm going to defer to the talking heads on TV, and I'm going to wear a mask, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get the jab, and I'm going to do that. But the parents who inflict that crap on their children without looking into it. It's one thing if you, like, oh, here, kids, take some vitamin C or something. Like, okay, the kids aren't suffering that bad. If you're doing something that makes your kids horribly uncomfortable, makes them suffer and cry, or gives them heart failure, if you're too lazy to look into what it might actually do and you're just, well, I'm just deferring to them. If you want to defer to other people when it comes to ruining your own life, Okay, you have that right. It's stupid, but that's up to you. I'm not going to force you to do anything differently. But imposing your ignorance and your gullibility and your fear onto your children instead of actually taking on the responsibility of finding out whether it's doing any good, that's just horrible. And the parents who've inflicted stuff and just tortured their children because a bunch of lying crooks and propagandists for Big Pharma told them to. And we're just like, well, it's not my responsibility. I just believe that guy on the TV. Okay, so if the guy on the TV says cut your children's toes off, because it's safer, don't you know? Are you going to do it? Or are you going to, at some point, hesitate for 2 seconds and go, maybe when it comes to the children who rely on me to protect them, I should do something more than just be a gullible idiot, and I should actually try to fire up my brain enough to figure out if I'm torturing my child for no good reason. Because a crap ton of parents in the U.S. tortured their children and endangered their lives for no good reason because they don't know how to think for themselves. And if they only did that to themselves, I would just have pity for them. But yes, if you do that to your children and you don't bother trying to look into it to find out if it's at all necessary or useful, then it isn't pity I have for you. It's pity I have for your children. And it's contempt I have for you. And so, yeah, that part absolutely pisses me off. But when people are victims of their own stupidity and ignorance, okay, that's just sad. But when they try to inflict suffering on others as a result of their own stupidity and ignorance, and this is everybody who believes in government, go down the line of issues that they believe in authoritarian violence, and all of it can be boiled down to you're taking your cluelessness and your crappy opinions and converting them into cheering for violence against your fellow man. And then you don't deserve pity. You don't deserve understanding. You're not just misguided. You're not just gullible. You're not just ignorant. You're cheerleaders for evil. Fucking stop it.